and welcome to Open to Connect. This is a venue where I talk with people who have a lot of perspectives on the value of networking and connecting. And I am so excited to have Anna Larson here today. We met, it's been quite a while ago. I think it was right about the time I ended up closing my career gap and working for Microsoft, and I was interviewed on her podcast. And so she came to mind when I was starting this. Your military spouse transition expert. So I can't wait to learn about you and what's happening in that space now. But would you love to give a little bit more of an introduction?
Sure, I would love that. So I am the founder of Milspouses Transition. I'm also by day, I own a small marketing company. I'm a fractional CMO for a variety of companies and organizations across all different industries. So that's what I kind of do by day. But my passion project has been supporting military spouses through the transition process. And the whole reason behind that is because when my spouse got out of active duty military life after almost 24 years, we had a little bit of a rough start. And what I realized during that time frame was that there was a lot for my veteran to do. And rightly so, because they need all the help that they can get when they're transitioning out of, a 20 plus year career, or even a 3-year career, honestly, if they're just separating and not retiring. They need all the support that they can get for that. But there was nothing for the spouses who had lived that same active duty lifestyle alongside their service member. And it was really difficult for me to figure out my place and my role and what I needed to be doing and how to move forward for myself. And so that's kind of where Milspouses Transition came from.
That is wonderful. And it resonates so much because I had the same thing where I followed my husband around for his career. And then when he got out, he's like, okay, your turn. What's your passion? And I'm like, I don't know. It's following you, apparently. So I had a little bit of crisis of, well, what do I do now? So your story is so relatable. I guess I would love to know a little bit about what is that looking like right now for military spouses? Because I know this job market is really tough. So what are you seeing?
It is really tough. I'm seeing a lot of spouses reaching out saying, are you hearing about anything? Are you seeing anything? A lot of spouses who have lost positions for one reason or another. And a lot of spouses that are currently headed towards, again, more upskilling, more educational opportunities, more certifications to try and make themselves more competitive, I guess you could say. And so I'm seeing a lot. I mean, it really, honestly, over the past couple of decades, not much has changed for military spouses in terms of employment. It's still really difficult for them to find jobs that are going to be comparable to their skill sets and that will pay them what they are actually worth. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of changes happening right now that I have seen. What I have seen are some improvements in things like the certification process or recertification across state lines, I should say, for licensure. I've seen improvements in some of the program offerings, mentorships being opened up to military spouses, especially during transition, where a lot of times you don't realize an organization can offer something to an active duty spouse, but the minute you turn veteran, as the minute that DD 214 gets handed to your service member, you no longer qualify. So I've seen a couple of organizations that have opened up or been able to open up that funding to those veteran spouses, which is amazing and wonderful and super helpful for all of those spouses who are leaving the active duty service or like their military life. They're not in the service, but they're leaving the active duty military life.
I said it's a different type of service. We often, even as military spouses, discredit what it takes. And I think that I also mentor, I know that I mentor a lot of job seekers, but what I see sometimes, even with them, is they'll discount the side things that they've had to do as valid experience. And what you talked about with upskilling is sometimes, like for me, I already knew how to manage a project which turned into product management, though I might not have recognized that at the beginning because no one put a professional definition to some of the things I was doing. So
Yeah, I had a really great conversation not too long ago with Rochelle Chapman, who is with the Adecco US Foundation, and she runs a program called It's My Turn, and it is specifically a career support program for veteran spouses. You have to have been out of the service for a year in order to even apply for this. And so what I loved about what she said is she said military spouses don't recognize their brilliance. And what she meant by that is she said, we're surrounded by people who have the same experiences that we do. So we don't recognize truly how different we are and truly what those capabilities that we're growing as an active duty spouse, what that can translate to in the civilian world, because we're surrounded by other spouses that are doing the same thing. She said, but when you're out there in the civilian world and you look around, you realize, oh, wow, this is unique. This is something that's different. And we have to start to reformat or reframe what we can do in those terms.
Yeah, I just really love that, especially because, we get into that military bubble. So it can be an echo chamber of everybody dealing with those same things like you talked about. But then what we know about the military spouse community is how often educated they are. I remember when I went through a cohort for military spouses, we had people with PhDs and masters, and they were struggling with finding work too. So it is just such a common thing in that community to forget that we normalize our crazy. We normalize the crazy that is the military life and forget sometimes how valuable those skills are
We
when it's
do. And
somewhere else.
yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of mentorship, and what you're doing with mentoring other people is so important, because I think sometimes we need an outside perspective in order for us to recognize truly our unique capabilities. We're so used to being around ourselves, we don't think we're anything special. And so that mentoring opportunities or mentorship where we have to verbally speak out what we can do and say what we can do, and then have somebody say, don't discount that. That's important. I think is a really big piece of supporting like service members and spouses for that matter through career transition processes.
Well, I'm a massive fan of mentorship, like massive. And I think I agree with you 100%. It makes such a difference. And even when it's not just spouses, right? When I mentor military personnel as well, often what I see is we feel comfortable with our own kind. Like, oh, I want to hear from another veteran, or I want to hear from another military spouse. But often it's that external, not related to the military person coming into your life, that's like, that can give you that perspective of that's not normal, or that's a superpower, or just even we use acronyms so much in the military, and I see that with service members where they've got acronyms all over the resume, which mean nothing to the civilian world. So I try to remind veterans and military spouses that make sure you're speaking to people who have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of both mentorship, but also like just really doing deep dives into self-awareness, like who you are, what your strengths are. As a Clifton Strengths coach, like that's a big one for me, is like, hey, dig into what you do best and highlight those areas, especially if you're not even just looking for a job, but trying to figure out what the right path is for you. Because that's really kind of the first question when you're transitioning or looking for a new career, or, whether that's transition out of active duty military life or just transitioning in your career path in general.
Mm-hmm. And pausing just a little bit, because I do acknowledge we're having a tiny bit of technical difficulty here, but you're coming across verbally great. Yeah,
That's good to hear.
Oh, great. And then see, I'm showing my age a little bit because I was like, I had a great question, and then it's like already gone. But it was in the you mentioned a part that when it's getting to know who you are. And that is such a vital step, especially for the military community, because we have made an identity of the things we've been doing. And sometimes you can just lose yourself and not even realize that you've become this thing without a lot of soul searching. Do you have steps that I know I address this in my course that I talk about and just little things, and I can go on to that. But I was like, do you have any steps that you would recommend someone to, if they have no idea how to rediscover who they are outside of the chaos of the military world, what would you recommend they do?
Ooh, that's a big one. I mean, because there's not really, it's not like there's a 5-step process and it's going to work for everyone. Everybody is so unique. But it starts to come down with thinking bigger than just the fact that when you're exiting active duty military life that you're changing jobs. It's so much bigger than that. That's the first thing, right? So when I talk about changes in identity and transition in that stage, I talk about 5 complete areas of well-being. We talk about the financial, career, physical, social, and community. And all 5 of those are equally as important. And sometimes we put so much weight on the career portion of it because that plays so heavily on financial and making sure your family is taken care of and making sure that you have a next step to go to, that we forget about some of the other ones. And so for me, it really comes down to, you have to start early and you have to start asking questions to yourself. And I have on our MilSpouse Transition website, we have a transition guide. And the very first thing it does, it has like 4 pages of questions you should be asking in all of those different 5 categories of well-being. And those questions that you should be asking are designed to kind of help you navigate through, oh, I hadn't even thought about this before, but this is a big piece of what I need to understand in order to move forward and feel successful or feel like I'm thriving, or I would have completely forgot about this and then it would have been too late. You know, all those things that we hear coming from transitioning families now where they're like, oh, it's too late now. We didn't even think about that. Nobody told us about this, or we missed that part of the, you know, the instruction we received during our TAP program, or whatever the thing is, because transition is a whirlwind of activity. It is never ending. And it just go as when you hit that 1 year out mark, you think you have, oh, it's a whole year. I hear spouses say this all the time. It makes me laugh. We have a whole year. And I'm like, it is going to fly by like a week. It is going to go so fast. And then afterwards they say, that went so fast. I did not get not even a half of what I thought I would be able to get done in that time frame. You know, so
all of that, like all of
exactly.
it. And I guess I could even relate. Sorry, I know I didn't mean to cut you off. We're having a little bit of the pause here on the live, but one of the things that if they need a reference point, think about the whirlwind of just PCSing, which if somebody's not military affiliated, that means moving to a new duty station permanently. What is permanent? Why do they use that word in the military? We all know that nothing is permanent, even after you get somewhere.
They need a caveat with permanent for a couple of years at least, right?
Yes, maybe that's what the C was meant to be.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, but that is one relation point. And to your point on starting early, like I really latched onto that because it's when you're dealing with identity and the community that you've been part of, and the almost even the expectation that you're not going to be somewhere for long, or if you're returning home after a long stint in the military, it can be pretty jarring to think of, I can put a piece of furniture here and not have to move it. Like even those small things. And I don't think we realize how much change in so many little areas happen until we're in it. So I love the idea of your guide and starting early. I love to challenge people to ask questions. And I'm going to go back to some of the job search piece in a second, or networking. Is I think sometimes, and I say this a lot, is people with things that come easy to them, they may not realize that's actually a superpower. That is the thing that they could bank a brand and a career on, and we discount it because it's easy for us. And like I want to challenge military spouses to think about, what do people come and ask you for help with, and really soul searching in those sorts of areas too when it comes to building. I hate to use the word brand sometimes because it feels like it's so overused, but it is, I should say, identity. do you see people thriving under learning how to professionally network? That's one of those. It's all tied together. Like, who are you? What are you known for? And then how do you connect with people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And for as far as the personal brand kind of thing goes, it is important to be able to know those hard skills and the soft skills that you possess, because when you're introducing yourself to people, instead of just saying, "Hi, I'm so and so and I want to do this," or "I do this," if you can use some of those innate talents that you have, those hard and soft skills, to use them to let people know truly the direction you're going. So, hey, I'm Anna and I love supporting military spouses. I'm especially enjoy speaking at workshops and on podcasts. Right now, I've given somebody a direction to go with the conversation. I've given them something, a more of a piece of me that allows them now to latch on, know me a little bit better, and they didn't have to dig for questions, because you know how awkward sometimes that initial networking chit chat can be. I'm a big fan of like coming up with 3 or 4 phrases that you can use depending on the situation you're in, where you are throwing out pieces of yourself that go deeper than just who you are and your job title, or your "this is what I want" job title in the conversation.
I really love that. If people are new to this world, we call it elevator speech, but it is having an elevator speech for yourself. And I would highly recommend that it doesn't start with your husband or your children, because that's what we're used to doing. In the military world, our identity literally gets tied to our husbands, or I should say spouses' last 4 digits of their social security number. So it's like,
Yes, it does. I can rattle. I mean, it's been 4 years. I can still rattle off my spouse's social security number. And honestly, he asked me this morning, "What's yours?" I'm like, "You should know this," but he's never had to, right? I know
100%.
his.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is funny. But I also think it's important to be, and this is just something for like kind of the veteran community too. I think a lot of times people give flack for, "Hey, don't, your military service is not translatable." And I would disagree with that. I absolutely think the skills you learn in military service, and this goes again for military spouses in the active duty military life, those are 100% relatable. I mean, it's what you've been doing for however long you've been doing it, sometimes decades. That is your skill set. You just have to learn how to say it in a way where you're talking about yourself and not your position. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. In fact, one of the activities that I've done, and I recommend people to do, especially military spouses, is just write down everything you do, and then Google power verbs and see which ones match, and then look at professional job postings. And I joke that grocery shopping is actually asset management on every level, especially on a military budget at times. So it is looking for those ties and acknowledging the power of them, because
Yes.
we often, like I said, we discount the things that become mundane to us without realizing how unique they are.
Absolutely. And there's going to be different levels of connections that you make in that networking opportunity. Not everyone is going to be the person you're going to reach out to because you have a potential job or you need a mentor, right? There are some people that are literally just in your network because it grows your availability to other industries or other companies or other groups. And then there's going to be the people that you want to have that good, warm, more than acquaintance relationship with, and sometimes on like, if we're talking about like LinkedIn, right? You can connect with somebody and you send them a connection note versus somebody that you just hit connect and hope that they say yes to, right? There's 2 different ways of creating that relationship. And we put a lot of emphasis on the one where we're developing a strong, warm connection with someone, where there's a symbiotic or mutual offering, where I'm giving something and I'm getting something from this. But there's power also in just expanding your network in terms of who sees what you're doing and what they know about you, even on the peripheral. Because sometimes those things pop into your head and you say, "Oh, I read something the other day and it was this person. I don't know them very well, but here's what I learned from them." Right. And that's where the power in just even general networking can come in.
Yeah, I love that you brush on that because, and I'm gonna ask a little more detailed questions. Is so you hear go network, but you don't always know step one to do that. What would you tell someone outside of defining who you are? It's like, okay, I know who I am. I think I want to go for this thing. What do you? And I actually am thinking LinkedIn, but I'm gonna let you have an opportunity to be like, it's not just LinkedIn, my dear. So like, what would you say step one?
I would say largely, just to caveat it largely is LinkedIn these days, right? There are not as many in-person networking opportunities as there used to be.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 2000s, that's all we did because the internet was not as pervasive in our business lives as it is now. But moving on from that, so the first thing that I would say is you need a goal in mind. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you just trying to meet people? Are you actually looking for a potential job? Are you looking for a mentor? Are you just there to get your own name out there and let people know, right? These are important because it's going to dictate how you network. So if you're there seeking some sort of personal relationship, you want to create a different experience than just handing out a business card or saying, hey, can we connect on LinkedIn? It's nice to meet you, and spending 3 minutes with someone, vice a good deep 15-minute conversation and hey, do you mind if I follow up with a phone call? So that's the first thing, is like making sure you have a goal. The other thing is being smart about where you're spending your time. There is no lack of online virtual networking opportunities, and not all of them are going to be the best fit for us. So really, you have to stop and think about, like, is this going to do what I need it to do? That doesn't mean don't try it, because you might try it and be like, oh, this is different than what I expected. But don't spend a lot of time just going from networking to networking to networking without really kind of saying to yourself, is my time being well spent in this space? And that's largely because there are so many virtual opportunities now that you can really get stretched thin, and burnout is real with networking too. Sometimes then we have to go crawl back in our dark spaces of, I need a minute alone. I don't want to be around people right now. I would say step 3 then becomes having that elevator pitch, or a couple of different ones ready to go, depending on who you meet and what you're planning on doing. So this is that self-awareness part of it. Like, I'm going here with this goal in mind. And so saying these things about myself are going to be important. And it's also really good, in my opinion, like, these are affirmations that we need to be saying to ourselves over and over and over again anyway. So practice them in your networking pitch. Tell people why you're so amazing. We need to not be afraid of that. And I'm not saying like in a braggart way, but in a way, again, that lets them understand better who you are and what your goal is. So those are like 3 of probably the bigger ones for me that I see people, they know this, but putting into practice is very different.
Yeah. So one of the things that, as you were talking, and I remember a lot of the people in the cohort that I did when we were being taught cloud server administration, there is just a fear factor. And right now, because the job market is tough, I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. It is tough. It's a good, I love that you talk about know who you are and what you stand for, because you also have to start mentally preparing. And you talked about in your guide that you have the mental preparation questions that someone could self-seek, but rejection is going to happen, and it's going to happen so often that I would love for you to speak about that courage to not just go out the first time, because the first time you can be nervous and just do it. It's the 15th time where you can start feeling like, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm scared. Now I'm scared because I've had too many no's.
Yeah, I mean, this is really hard, right? Because rejection at some point, it can be very, very demoralizing, especially when you say to yourself, I have so much to offer, and you recognize that in yourself, and it feels like nobody's willing to give you a chance. And unfortunately, the reality is that there are a lot of very qualified people out there. And so this is where I think sometimes we just need to adjust the way we're doing things. And this is an easier said than maybe done sometimes, but changing tactics. one of the stories I love to tell about the very first real job I got after college. I moved to Washington, D.C., unmarried, no military affiliation at this point, other than my dad. It was an Air Force vet, and moved to DC, no job, and had a couch to crash on for a couple of weeks. And I said, got to get a job. And so I started looking up people who had the job I wanted. And I reached out to them and just introduced myself and said, hey, I would really love to take 15 minutes of your time and just have an informational interview. And this was really an opportunity. I gave them an opportunity to tell me how they got to where they were at. That's what I wanted. But each one of those informational interviews, I showed up with, a little something like a bakery item or a cup of coffee if I knew what it was that they enjoyed, and my resume, and would hand it to them at the end of it, and hand my resume out at the end and just said, hey, if you ever hear something that comes up in this area, I would love to be considered. Shake their hand, and never had an expectation. Mm-hmm. And I got my first job with one of those informational interviews, and it was right down the path that I wanted. It was something I did not have experience in, but that relationship building that I was able to do with that person made a significant difference when it came to people that they were considering for that position. So this is what I mean by changing your tactics. If you're spreading yourself out, going to a million networking events, maybe it's time to start looking at those deeper relationships and how you can build on those to maybe help support finding that job and stopping that burnout of constant and consistent rejection. Yes. And the other part of it is to remind yourself what those superpowers are. This is, again, I have to just jump back in. This is one of the reasons why I love things like CliftonStrengths, or whether it's CliftonStrengths, or if you are a DISC person or a Myers-Briggs person or an Enneagram person, right? Having some of those self-awareness tools in your belt to remind yourself like, hey, I can do this, but maybe I need to shift it differently. So instead of feeling burned out, I'm doing it in a way that empowers me. So understanding who you are and how you get fed versus how you get depleted in your actions is a big part of that, being able to weather the rejection process.
Yeah. I love your point on focus. I would say, as you were talking, it's almost like the difference between focus and frantic.
Yes.
And it's easy to get frantic, especially if you like finances, paying bills, eating, those are all exceedingly real. And as that piles up, it's very easy to think the more I do and the faster I do it, the faster success will come, when it may be far more crafting your message, meeting with the right people, attending the right networking events, all to your point. I just appreciated you saying that. And I even tell job seekers, set aside a time to job seek and then go do something else. Take a walk, make sure, and then it's using your time wisely. What jobs am I going to take the time to tailor a resume? What companies, what people am I going to add on LinkedIn? And how do I find them, as opposed to, I used to get at Microsoft all the time. I want to work at Microsoft, and I would get tons of people just sending their resume blankly to me. It's like, thanks for accepting my request. Here's my resume. Find me a job. And I'm like, that never worked for anybody.
And I think sometimes people, they do that because they're exhausted. Mm-hmm. By having had to try so many other things, and they just get tired and they're like, what's the point anymore? Right? You get super frustrated with the process itself. If you get to that point, it is time to step back for a minute and reevaluate what you're doing. And knowing that doing things that feel more like you. I mean, not everybody is socially the same, right? We don't all create relationships in the same way. We don't build community in the same way. Some people love to be out doing things and others don't. That introvert extrovert kind of, interaction, where being with people might energize some and being with people might deplete others. And it's the same thing with job searching. And it's the same thing with networking and all the things that go along with job searching. Some things are going to deplete you. And those things that deplete you, you have to stop and think, how can I do this in a way that is going to be more closely aligned with what feels like me, who I am, what makes me happy, what energizes me? Is there a way to change this process other than doing it the way everybody else has done it for eons? And I think sometimes thinking through that can help reframe some of what you're doing. And maybe some of the things you're doing that are especially not effective can go away. You just don't know until you stop and think it through.
Yeah, I love that, because I was laid off in May, and when it immediately happened, I kind of put my open to work banner up, and within 24 hours, I took it back down. And part of that was having a huge network that is and mentoring people for so long that people just bombarded me with help, and I hadn't even taken the time to process the layoff. So there is that piece like you're talking about, and I'm thinking about how to show up better when you get those opportunities, and then also maybe jumping into a new opportunity isn't actually where you can find true success. And that's when I paused and said, you know what, I want to give this business a try. And I want to see if doing my own thing would bring so much more soul fulfillment than just jumping back into worker bee role. And I had to ask myself, what is the greater risk? Is it discovering the answer to that question, or spending the rest of my life asking what if I would have taken that risk? And I know you started your own business and your own passion brand and all those things. I would love to hear a little bit about what made you pivot, or was it always on your mind, or did you decide to pivot from something else? I'd love to hear that part of your story too.
Yeah. So, first of all, just to kind of address what you were just saying, 100% agree that sometimes you have to just take a minute and rethink what your end goals are going to be. And I think when I talk about career well-being, especially with military spouses, we talk about that career well-being is not necessarily having a high power, high paying job. It literally, the definition we use is, do you like what you do all day long? Right. And that is career well-being. And if you have a job and you hate it, you do not have good career well-being. If you have a job and you love it, you do. And if you are a nonprofit volunteer and you love that, you have career well-being. If you're a stay-at-home parent and you love that, you have good career well-being, right? So this is one of the distinctions that is important to understand when you are looking at that job and looking at that potential career shift, like what you were saying, where you had to take a step back and thought, I want to give this a try. I think I could really love this. So when that happened for me, I will say that for 20 years, I have been in the marketing industry. It's what I went to university for. It is what I started my career in. It was marketing and program management, and that's pretty much what I've done for my entire professional career. And I was, as a military spouse, a little bit of a unicorn in the sense that the company that I was working for, when I did meet my service member and we got married and then started the PCS seasons around the world, I was fortunate in that the company valued me enough as an employee. This is in the early 2000s, that they created a remote work position for me. And if you know anything about the early 2000s, that was pretty much unheard of.
Yep. It's a big deal. Big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And it was, I mean, there weren't a lot of remote resources like there are now. So it was complicated and messy. And there was a lot of, different software things that I had to figure out. And anyway, we sorted all that out. But I did that for 16 years as we traveled around the different parts of the world that we lived in. And when we would go to a location overseas where there wasn't a SOFA agreement for working, then they would put me on an extended leave of absence. And then when we would go back into an area where I could work, they would pull me in on whatever projects they had available with the same title and the same pay. I mean, it all just stayed kind of the same. So while I had a career, if I have to think back to my definition of career well-being, I had to self-select out of a lot of things I would have loved to do. And I had to do that because of our active duty military life. So there was a huge pro in that I had a consistent job, right? But there was a big con in that I didn't feel as fulfilled as I think I could have been in performing that work and being in that company, and the kinds of things that I could have done. And so when we went to our duty station before the one we retired out of, so we retired out of Fort Hood, Texas. And prior to that, we actually were living in Africa with the military. And it was when we went to Africa that I said to myself, when we return, I know I will be in a different season where working for this company, while it's been wonderful, I'm done. I'm done. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I also knew I wasn't going to be able to work in Africa for this company. So as opposed to going on a leave of absence, I resigned. And while in Africa, I worked for the State Department. I worked on the PEPFAR program, which is the Presidential Relief for AIDS program, which was an amazing experience. Allowed me to really experience the culture of where we were living, the people, go to very remote places, and really just, it was amazing experience.
Okay. What a personal stretching and learning experience.
Absolutely. And it really allowed me to do what I needed to do, I think, which was take a step back. And it was different than anything I'd ever done before, but it allowed me to take a step back and take a breath and just say, okay, what's next for me? And when we got back to the United States, I started volunteering, doing some marketing work for a nonprofit at the urging of a good friend of mine. And that turned into a business. And I've been doing that ever since. That was in 2018. So we're going on 7 years now of what I would call my marketing agency now. And I love what I do every day. And this passion project of mine really came for all the things that happened when my spouse transitioned. And I kind of had what I would call a moment of crises. And it was that personal identity crises that happened as opposed to like my job. So for me, when my spouse went to go get his DD 214 on that last day of his military service, and this is on his retirement day, this is in the middle of COVID. So I do like to say that because I did have a very different experience in that non-COVID era transitioning military families might have had. But the day he went, I watched him drive off, and I didn't go with him because, 6 feet away, and all he was doing was picking up a couple of manila envelopes, one for him, one for me. That was like, your congratulations, you're no longer part of this, military community. And I watched him drive away, and in my head, the thought popped into my head. I said, I don't know if I can use the on-post library, which would seem like a no big deal kind of question that one might ask. But for me, what it signified was I haven't prepared for this enough. I'm not ready to not be a military spouse anymore. I'm not ready to not be living an active duty life anymore. That's what that question that popped into my head, that comment of I can't use I don't know if I can use the on-post library signified. And I had kind of this breakdown of I'm not ready. I wanted to call him and say, come back. It's not time yet.
Ready for this.
We need a few more weeks. I have more questions.
Yeah.
But that moment, when I started to share that moment of crises with other spouses, it was an overwhelming feeling of solidarity. And yes, I experienced that too, because the resources aren't out there, or I didn't know where to look, or there was nothing for me as the spouse, or I was so focused on getting my service member to transition well that I forgot about myself in the process. And so this is why I don't want to say harp, but I do harp a little bit about how important it is to pay attention to what you also need when you are going through these transitions. So if you're a military family and there's a career transition happening and your spouse is getting out of service, yes, it is super important that they find a good career, that they're able to do what they want to do, but it is equally as important that you get the same opportunity. And I will 100% back that statement for every military spouse out there. It is so important that you find something that you feel good doing all day.
Yes. Yeah, I want to echo one thing that we military spouses don't do well. We don't ask for help. Like we get so accustomed to handling all the things while, sometimes I've had to move while my husband was deployed, or it was a small move across across the base because they were going to tear down our housing. But it was still, I have to handle all these things. I have to do all these things. And it's always, I have to. And we never think, what resources do I have that I can ask for help in this thing that I don't know how to handle? And it may be that transition is that thing that you just have to say, I need help here. And embrace. It's actually strength, right? It's not embracing the weakness of the moment. No, it's embracing your strength to know yourself enough where your boundaries or skill sets, all those things lie.
100%. Yes. It's not even just I need help, but I need help in this way, right? Because not everybody is going to benefit. Not everybody wants just the resource, right? They might need something a little bit more. And I think it's digging into, why do I need this? What am I going to use it for? Because there is a lot of resources out there, and you can get caught up in the research and you can spend hours going through different organizations and what they offer. And is this the right one for us? Right. And so I think it's really, you have to take the time again to set that goal. What does my family need? What does my spouse need? What do I need? And when you can state those things, now you know the direction to start looking for that, asking for help, looking for the resources, getting the support you need. Because there's a lot of people to be like, I can do this for you, I can do that for you. And we think, okay, we'll take it. Maybe that's going to be it, right? I would say this is where that burnout starts to happen. There's, again, so much happening during transition. You cannot do all of it. You have to be selective about what's going to benefit you the most.
Yeah. I love that, because it can feel like, and I see this with my own business building, like everybody has a great solution to a problem that I'm experiencing, but I've already bought different courses and things that I just need to go finish. And the answers might already be in there. And I just see that when you're talking about so many, especially in a military community, there's so many resources available that you can feel busy doing the right things, but not focusing on the best things, that most profitable choice in that moment. I mean, personally profitable, moving forward, progress. And I love that you talk about know your goal and then chase those things, not all the extra that's available.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to make sure you give yourself time to actually put into practice what it is that you're doing, right? So a lot of time, like you were saying, I have to finish the course. But then you also need time after the course is done to put into practice what you've learned. I think, I mean, it's a balancing act. I am not in any way, shape, or form perfect in this area. If you looked at my calendar, you would be like, practice what you preach, Anna. Come on now. Right. But there does have to be that balance, and reminding yourself, again, thinking about those 5 areas of well-being. If we're too heavily focused on one and forget all the others, we become out of balance again. And so you have to really you have to think about the balance of those 5 different areas, because they are all the things that feed you as a happy human being. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, all of that. I just want to plus 10, all of those things. And especially because there's just so much I just think about how often, I call it productive procrastination or I think that term is actually out there, where it's, let me fill my time with all of these things, not put it into practice, or try and put all of it into practice at once without seeing if one thing works. And that's what I'm having to learn Especially, I love to chase shiny objects. It is just, I am a crow in that, where it's like, what is that thing? I must go see it.
Yes, me
And
too.
and I relate. And I was also going to say, yes, we can practice what we preach, but also when we don't do the things well, we understand what to tell people. Like, do this better than I do it. And maybe that is their superpower, that they can actually focus in that very structured way because they've had to do it as military spouses. What is that next step to get this move handled, to get my kid registered, to find an emergency contact for my family, since we know 0 people in this location.
Absolutely. Well, and those are some of those moments of brilliance that we were talking about way in the beginning of this conversation that we discount. I mean, it becomes almost like a joke to us. Oh, I can find an emergency contact, no problem. That is a skill that not everybody has, is to
Right.
be able to befriend and create connections with people in a way where it's somebody you can rely on, at least for a moment, right? Doesn't have to be forever, but for the first 6 months until I actually get to know some parents, my next door neighbor is this person for me. And that is a skill set. Those are the kind of little mini actions that we as military spouses do all the time that you don't think is something that's applicable, and it is. You just have to understand how you can frame that in a job searching or a civilian world sense.
Yeah. And then also, I think, sell the value of it. I was just thinking as you were talking, and it's the military spouses really know how to kind of build community around them. We're forced to, and we can dive in deep very fast because we know if we want that fulfilling time where we are, we have to kind of bloom where we're planted, and we need to be those fast growing trees. So it's like selling that to an employer. And I remember advocating at a talk once on why you want military spouses. And one of the things I said is, we never forget what it's like to be new somewhere. I mean, we've been out of the military since 2008, and I don't forget what it's like to be new somewhere where everything feels a little bit awkward. So we are often those bridge builders. So you want to talk about customer service type people, and I'm not talking about phone support. I'm talking about, we have this product that we need someone to go and manage the customer and build that relationship quickly. It's like, you want a military spouse for roles like that. You just do. It's what we do. So
I love that distinction. I love that so much. I love the idea. I actually had not thought about that community building process the way you had just said it. I'm going to steal that, Jacqueline. I'm
do it
going to
all
steal
you
that
need.
and use it.
Put it in your guide. Yeah.
100%. I mean, because it really is, again, it is one of those things where you think, oh, everybody does this, but no, not everybody does.
No, it's so common to be at networking events too. And I think it's like, I remember, and I do this still when it's in person, which is, I need to get back into some more in person stuff. But I remember just kind of sitting back and surveying the room for a minute, because a lot of people flock to the speaker. And I'm like, don't go over there. Not, especially not right off they get on off of stage. Like, look around and who else is in the room, because those are maybe your hiring managers. Those may be your area experts. They just asked this one person to get on stage, but who else is in the room? Who's not talking to anyone? Get over there and say hi. What brings you to this event? That's it. And then have your elevator pitch that you gave earlier ready.
Yeah. And this largely comes back to, how do you like to build those social relationships, right? How do you like to do that? It might be really hard for some people to walk up to a complete stranger and say, "Hi, why are you here?" Right? Like, that is like, it just makes them turn cold and dead inside to think about having to do that. So it really, while that works for you, like in my
Yeah.
head, I think, find a way to do that is you. What does
Yes.
that look like, right? And it might be something as simple as, like, just, I don't know, like standing on the edge of a conversation until you feel comfortable enough to jump in. I mean, I don't have all the answers right now, like,
No. And
in that sense, but if you do have to push yourself, you have to be okay with doing things that you're uncomfortable with. I mean, I'm not saying every moment is going to be, you should just look for the way that says, this is all me, right? Because that's not going to necessarily be the way people receive best either. But you don't want to do all those uncomfortable things over and over and over again until you're burned out and
Right.
you
Yes.
hate doing what you're doing, right?
Mhm.
And that's that balance again that we talk about. But I do love that idea of like, take a different strategy when you're in a space, look around and say, what is everybody doing? What can I do that's maybe a little bit different? Because that might be the key to
Mhm.
having a successful moment.
Yeah. And I would, we're going to go back to community for a second here, but in those scenarios, don't sell short the idea of bringing someone else with you who's also in a job a search. But if you can find that person who's just a little bit different than your personality, like I'm one of those that I literally had to be a wallflower enough to where I was like, nothing is going to change unless I do something different here. And that's how I learned to go up to somebody. But it wasn't that I wasn't terrified the first time I did it. But then I brought someone else the next time because I had kind of gotten over that fear of walking up to someone. They hadn't. So we went together. I said, hi, what brings you to this event? They answered, and I like, can I introduce you to my friend here? And use that community to bridge those gaps. And if you can find your counter person, your other person, you say iron sharpens iron, find that other person that can advocate for you in those moments. So there's me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nobody said you have to do it all by yourself, right? There's no rule that says you're on your own.
Yeah. It actually can help you process after an event too. Did I read the room right? Did you see that when this happened? What in the speaker resonate? When you're having the car ride home, if you go together an event like that, there's a lot of extra that you can do that validates what you saw there, gives you a little bit more confidence. Commiserate if you're like that speaker was really long, and there was one that every other word they use the word like. So we're like doing this, and I was just like, so like, did you have a good time at that? Like, but it is those sort of things where it's are you can learn together, grow together, share those moments of, well, that was awkward. Did you see when I said that?
Yes. Yes. So one of my good friends, she says she's not a social person, says she's an introvert, but you would never guess that. And it's because she's learned that when she goes to an event, no matter what the event is, she has to have a quote unquote job. Whatever it might be, a self-inflicted job, but it's a job. There's something that she is there to accomplish. And whether that's being my wingman, or being the one that's going to be the greeter at the door and say, oh, I'm so glad you're here, even though she's not working the event necessarily, right? She puts herself into a position where she has something to do, and then that's how she can make herself feel comfortable, and it's how she thrives. And so when people think about her, they don't think, oh, she's very introverted. They actually think she's very extroverted because of that ability of her being able to learn, I can do it if I put myself in this context. Anyway, I think that's a brilliant way of trying to rethink the way you're doing things, especially when it comes to career transition, job searching, networking, all of those things that have to do with that transition process.
I am absolutely 100% your friend in that, where people are like, no, she's extroverted. She just knows what she's doing in her. I'm like, no, I know that I have this much bandwidth before I hit a wall of exhaustion, and I'm going to spend the bandwidth, and then I'm going to go sit in the bathroom for 15 minutes if I need a break. But I just know that I can be on for a time, and then know that I will also need recharge time, even after something like this, where we're not actually in the room together. There is and being on right now. And I may leave here and just be like, okay, I'm exhausted now. But
You need
that
to
goes
take a
back
break.
to the very beginning of the conversation, is like, know yourself, soul search yourself, and
Yeah.
be okay with what you find. Like,
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that. I was just going to say that you have to be okay with what you find and embrace it and be excited about that, because that is what makes up who you are. And you might look at somebody who's different and say, "Oh, but they're so much more successful." That's not true. They've just learned how to navigate who they are better than you have at this point. Um, that's the way
hey,
I would like to see it.
Yeah, and I know we are getting close to time. You just remind me. I say this all the time. I'm actually putting it on a shirt soon to, to let people buy it. But I say you're not everybody's cup of tea, but you're somebody's kombucha, and it's okay to let your cups of tea like go, because you are going to relate to somebody. And when you find that tribe, those people who are in your court that will follow you, um, wherever you go, those are the people that you want to build that community with. You want to build the professional networks with, and try not to obsess. I'm just going to tell anybody listening, try not to obsess about the people uh, who don't like you, or maybe don't answer, or just you felt so awkward talking to them. I've had those moments where they actually thought it was great, and I'm like, that was the most awkward. I'm glad something you got the greatness out of it, because I was struggling the whole time.
I
I
love
wish I
that.
could remember who told me that, and I thought I knew. And then when I went to thank them for saying that phrase, they were like, "I don't think I said that." And I said, "Well, if anybody's listening and you said that to me the very first time, please let me know, because I want to credit you on the T-shirt."
Oh,
Yeah.
and I think people say a version of that all the time, right? But I love that you've taken that and created this, like, this is my power thing for me. I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. And then I know we're getting close to time. So I love to ask any guests that I have, is there anything that you wish I would have asked you and I didn't? And if the answer is no, then how can people find you and connect with you? I assume you're open to those connections. I hope so, since you're on the Open to Connect podcast. But yeah.
Yeah, so the only thing we did not miss any questions. I loved the flow of this conversation. The only thing I would add to anything that we've said is to remember that you're not going to accomplish everything in a day. It's little tiny small actions that build up over time that are going to take you to where you need to be. And so don't get so frustrated. That's the last kind of the final thought I would leave. And as far as connecting with me, you can find me here on LinkedIn. This is where I love to hang out. Anna Larson is my name and my LinkedIn profile. You can also find me, my Milspouse Transition is also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and all the different places. And if you find me, you can find Milspouse Transition. We'll just put it that way. So
Yes. Yes.
we also have milspouse transition.com. If you are a military spouse headed through transition, go check out the resources we have. We're a young organization, but we are building and growing quickly. So we would
I
love to
actually
have.
have, I was a guest early when you were starting your own podcast. So I put a link on my own website to that podcast episode, which can also lead to more of your playlist and everything else. So you can go to either website. If you can't remember one, then go to another. And yeah, and she has a guide for you. It sounds like I have a guide on how to use AI. If you're totally terrified of networking at all, then I just did a video yesterday, like, don't let it be you, but let it get you past the writer's block. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
would say we have your 31 days of LinkedIn posts. We have your guide on our website,
there
actually.
we go.
Yeah. So look at that.
I've rolled
All
that
sorts
into
of
I
things.
rolled that into some of my courses, and I might have attached it to the AI guide. I don't think so. I'm like, it's definitely in my tracker thing that I have, where you can track your job search, your networking, and all that stuff on my website too. But awesome. I love that we're supporting each other. I'll make sure to put in, even I've got a resource tab that I'm building, so I want to make sure I put your actual website on there. And those who have been here through the whole time, thank you for that. And Anna, I loved this conversation. I would have it all over again. And keep doing what you're doing, right? Keep advocating. And if anybody's stuck today, go advocate or help one person, and you'll feel so much better by the end of the
Thanks
day.
for having me, Jacqueline. I also love this conversation. And if I can help anybody out there listening, please just reach out.
Mhm. Yeah, like I always say, look for the helpers, and I know that you're one of them, and they would be completely blessed to have you in their network and to know you. So, thank you again.